Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our training. This is our second annual kind of advocacy overview. Glenn and I have been conducting these trainings on a regional basis, and we appreciate everybody for joining us this evening. I'm going to give a real brief federal overview before Glenn kind of goes into the states and strategy, and we'll talk a little bit about some new PCA programs. Um, as everyone may be aware, um, PCA as being one of the parties, along with the Cigar Association of America and Cigar Rights of America, we successfully beat back the Food and Drug Administration on the Deeming Rule. The FDA has filed their notice of intent to appeal that decision. If they do, in fact, move forward with the appeal, we will find out that information, the merits of it, and if in fact they're going to do it on November 1st. So just in short order, we'll know kind of the status of that. Um, Outside of the deeming rule for premium cigars, there are some other issues that are related to the cigar industry that would affect retailers or manufacturers. One of the pending rules, which we filed opposition to, was the tobacco manufacturing product standards. This would create lab-like settings and apply regulations that are in effect for pharmaceuticals and food products on foreign and domestic tobacco manufacturing. Things that we view as unreasonable, especially given the Caribbean basin's infrastructure, and it would also create additional problems with migration issues, environmental concerns, the like. So we have voiced our opposition at every front of that, joined some of the other industry groups. The other major one is the characterizing flavor ban at the federal level. That is something that has been sent by the Food and Drug Administration to the Office of Management and Budget for final review. This is another regulation that PCA has gone on the record as opposing for retail reasons, solely retail, as well as some of the concerns to the overall industry itself. So we filed a comment in opposition to that. I will be conducting the meeting with the Office of Management and Budget opposing the characterizing flavor rule. I get a lot of questions about that. Timetable, what does that mean? We keep in regular contact with a lot of our industry partners, and I can tell you as soon as that rule is, um, uh, finally promulgated, there will be a lawsuit that they don't have the merits, they don't have the data. This is another area where the Food and Drug Administration has failed to substantiate the claims that they've made, and we've been consistent in that messaging. One of the minor things that also is on our radar from the Food and Drug Administration side is nicotine maximum threshold. Um, this rule is predominantly for combustible cigarettes. However, if the FDA were somehow able to successfully appeal the decision and re-regulate premium cigars, they could in effect apply these nicotine maximum to other products. Um, so we are going to be actively opposing this regulation as well, or really seeking an exemption for premium cigars. It's also important to note in the characterizing flavor rule, we also weighed in on behalf of pipe tobacco. So that's an area where I know a lot of times because of our name, sometimes folks are like, well, you don't worry about pipe tobacco. This is very much front and center in our opposition to the characterizing flavor rule. And it is on the state level as well as the federal level. Congress finally back up and functioning. Um, there, we're not expecting any major hurdles. You'll have your routine tax increase bills that are out there. One of the things that I'm most proud about in our government affairs team is both Glenn and I working alongside our colleagues. In the last 3 years, there has been no legislative tax increase in any of the 50 states or the federal government go through. Last Congress, there was a Democratic trifecta. It was a lot more precarious of a situation where we had to activate the grassroots. We're not going to rest on our laurels, but it's certainly not at the highest DEFCON level, so to speak. But we will be working those issues as well as some other retail issues. For those of you that are retailers on here, we sent out a notice today about retail crime. We're very much focused holistically on issues that affect the business of specialty tobacco retailing. And that includes small business issues, that includes credit card processing issues. How can we make, as an association, your life easier so your business can continue to thrive and grow and expand? So that's some of the stuff that we're working on at the federal level. I'll kick it over to Glenn, who's done a phenomenal job. I think we had 9 governors sign positive legislation this past year. We have a lot of momentum coming into next year. We'll certainly have a set of challenges, but I think we're equipped to prepare that. Association-wise, our funding levels are certainly getting back to normal. Obviously, the COVID gave us challenges, but we're fully staffed and ramping up all of our advocacy. I know Jay Davis is on, who's one of our board members. They've done a phenomenal job in giving us the resources and the direction to pursue an aggressive government affairs strategy. And that's where you'll see our communications have changed, where we are combating misinformation, whether the CDC is pushing out junk polls or an anti-tobacco group is doing an op-ed. It's not going to go unchecked. We are going to factually dispute what the opposition is going. I think everybody here can agree that this is a business that's about camaraderie. This is a business, there's fraternity. This is a business where we believe in the freedom of adult consumer choice. And that message is going to resonate from the halls of Congress to the states. I will just close my remarks with one of those things that's a substantive change going into the new year is we are establishing a grant program for state associations for advocacy. This will be something where there'll be a set criteria. State associations will be able to apply for that. This is predominantly to subsidize state associations that seek to get an outside lobbyist that's based within their state. Our advocacy committee, which we meet every 2 weeks, will be the ones that judge who gets those grants. But Glenn and I had a meeting today with Scott Pierce, our executive director, about setting that criteria and getting that fully ramped up for the new year. I can't give Glenn enough praise for the work that he's done in establishing state association, reestablishing dormant state associations. And I think that, we're going to continue to really build upon the record of this past year. Glenn, kick it over to you on the states.
Well, thanks for the kind words, but the real kudos go to the retailers that have really stepped up the game in terms of their personal and collective advocacy on behalf of their shops and on behalf of their states. We couldn't have done it without them. And, 9 governors in 1 year signing pro-cigar legislation is probably unprecedented, but the vast majority of those bills were spearheaded and initiated and cultivated by the retailers, and a small handful of retailers in those states. 2 good ones in the South that were signed this year was the governor of Louisiana signed the bill that keeps trade show samples in New Orleans as not tax. But the governor of Louisiana signed the bill that prevents taxes on trade show samples when the show was back in New Orleans. That was most appreciated, and it was really spearheaded as a inducement to get the show and keep the show in New Orleans by the New Orleans and Louisiana Convention and Visitors Bureau. And I think that's a testament to a third party organization recognizing the economic impact of the industry and the trade show. And the second one was the governor of South Carolina signing the bill that prevents any local regulation of tobacco products. That's a piece of legislation. Matter of fact, I've had 3 conversations about such bills in the last several days. It's a marvelous tool to prevent us from creating a quilt work of regulations and tax initiatives at the local level. A lot of our aunties, the heart, lung cancer, the body parts lobbies, have in the absence of statewide action on things like smoking, and taxes. They're in the absence of that and their inability to get that through state legislatures, they're turning to legislation that allows greater local authority over the questions that we're most concerned with. And thankfully, I think that it sets a great precedent that the governor of South Carolina signed a bill preventing such. I'm going to go through a little litany of issues to be that we look out for. Over the last 12 months, Josh and I and our staff in Washington have had to scan over 7,000 pieces of legislation to narrow down to those that we're most concerned with. Because we get pinged anytime a bill is introduced that deals with nicotine, vape, e-cigarettes, smoke, tobacco, permitting, you name it. All these trigger words bring up these bills in our system. We have to peruse every single one of them, narrow it down to those that we're most concerned about. Of the nearly 7,000, it was closer to 10, but 7 to 10,000 bills. After 5, it's all relative. There was about 250 that we had to narrow it down and be a particular concerned about. Of that 250, we launched petition campaigns to state legislatures on about 52 bills in the last 12 months. Of those, the following issues are the ones we're most concerned about. Flavor bans, because we don't know how broad and general they are. Some of them are overly broad to where they get into questions like flavor descriptors and flavor characteristics. And those are very general, nebulous terms in the world of legislation. So it's not just mass market consumer products, convenience store market, if you will. It could really encroach its way to the premium market. Tax increases, local regulation bills, as I mentioned, and making sure that we don't get caught up in anything to do with vape and e-cigarettes. All too often these days, when there's an attack on vape and e-cigarettes, the bills have been written so generally, so spread out that it could capture anything involved with nicotine. And that forced us to play defense at a time we really shouldn't have to do that. So those are the general issues that we have to keep a particular eye out for. With that, I'm going to go through a rundown of the South on those bills that we currently know that are in the works, that groundwork has been laid, that there's efforts to pursue these in the 2024 legislative season. There will be a revisiting of obtainment of a tax cap in Virginia. I see my friend Rich is on the call here. We're going to be pursuing a tax cap in the great state of Georgia. There is groundwork being laid for a tax cap in Kentucky. In Louisiana, we have to keep an eye out on tax and smoking regulation. Nothing dramatic, nothing truly anticipated, but there is this standing study to close smoking exemptions in Louisiana. It's nothing that I considered really overly threatening, but we keep an eye out on it. Interestingly enough, towards the middle of the last session earlier in the year, a Louisiana senator introduced a bill that would have dropped the OTP tax in Louisiana to 8%. It didn't have a fighting chance, but it got a hearing and it died, but we were impressed that it was introduced. So that's something that we may be following up on. And on a federal side, I'll just go back to a conversation I had yesterday with Louisiana. It is now the most powerful state in the country. It truly is. It's got the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader coming out of the same state, which is pretty unusual. And we're going to be working with our Louisiana retailers to echo our messages on federal issues using that local retail network. Last year, there was a tax increase introduced in Tennessee. It didn't see the light of day, but the very fact that it was introduced is troublesome. And if it comes up once, it can come up again. I also kind of stay concerned about Tennessee with regard to local authority legislation. So we have to keep an eye on that. Texas, this past year, a flavor ban was introduced, as well as a piece of legislation to ban smoking on college campuses. We took a position on that. The flavor ban also didn't see. If Jay's on the phone, I don't even think it got a hearing. Did it, Jay?
No, it did not. It got killed in committee.
I didn't think it even got a hearing. Everything should be quiet.
No, you're right. It got killed in committee.
Everything should be quiet on the legislative front in Alabama, Arkansas, and Florida. And we were pleased that that a bill passed the West Virginia legislature that allows for cigar bars, cigar lounges at state resorts. And we have to recognize Patrick Lucas, who owns Almost Havana, Almost Heaven Cigars in Hurricane, West Virginia, who is also a sitting member of the West Virginia legislature. Always great to have a sitting legislator own a cigar shop. And we recognize Patrick and his efforts in the great state of West Virginia. Also, we think it'll be quiet in Mississippi. Every year for the last decade of my life, a statewide smoking ban has been introduced in Mississippi and it always dies on the same day. And ironically enough, a tax increase is always introduced in Mississippi and always dies on the same day. And likewise, we think things will stay quiet in North Carolina and South Carolina. And also, while we're recognizing legislators that own cigar shops, Senator Todd Johnson owns a couple of shops in the great state of North Carolina. Senator Johnson's been an invaluable resource on legislation across the country. And he helps to look out for things in North Carolina as a sitting senator who owns cigar shops. So again, like Patrick, and this year, there's 4 other cigar shop owners that are seeking seats in state legislatures. So I think that's an amazing trend and a testament to this industry and getting involved in the political process. So with that, those are the issues that we anticipate or know that are coming, the ones that we need to keep an eye out on. And now I'm going to shift gears before we take questions, and then we'll turn off the recording for if anybody needs to get more candid than that. The resources that PCA is making available to support efforts in the states. One, we've got our handbook for state associations, which is sort of a how-to manual for those states that are either organizing, need to be organized, need to refresh themselves on strategies, the lobbying process, grassroots mobilization, and those types of issues. And that's posted on cigaraction.org. And cigaraction.org is our principal tool to reach the consumers, to engage them on petitions to the state legislators. And it's also a network for the retail community to use to spread the word about legislation that's good, bad, and indifferent. So we hope that all the retail community will put a link to cigaraction.org on your respective websites and review the handbook, whether you've got an established association or not. It's a good resource to turn to. And with that, I also want to highlight that we could use some retail leadership to help us formulate associations in Arkansas and Tennessee. Georgia's in a rebuilding process. There'll be a new association, we believe, for Kentucky. Louisiana's in a regrouping stage. Texas is established, and Alabama is well established as far as state associations are concerned, as is North Carolina and South Carolina. But anybody that wants to have a talk about that issue and association building or regroups, or the organizational process, just we can take that in questions or after we go offline. Also, we encourage you to have a Capitol Hill Day with your fellow retailers that's worked throughout the country at bringing attention to your small businesses. So organize yourselves to all of you to descend upon your given state capital on a particular day to make a house call on each of your state legislators so that they know who you are. Which brings me to my next point. Know your legislators, know who they are, know them by their first name, know their birthday, send them a cigar, whatever the case might be. Nothing irritates me more than, oh God, there was a tax bill in Nevada a few years ago, and I knew the shop had a particular legislator that was needed on the bill. And I called him, I said, who is your legislator? And they said, I don't know. We got to get rid of that forever. Everybody's got to know who their members of their House and Senate are in their state capital. You need to know each other because they need to know that your small business is a part of the business community within their districts. So with that, also make calls, send emails on petitions that we release on issues in your given state. So we also encourage you to get your consumers involved in that regard, get them to sign up for cigaraction.org so that we can build our database for grassroots mobilization when we need it at both the state and federal level.